My name is Not Easy by Debbie Dahl Edwardson. Indian Country, September 6, 1960. Sunny and Chicky. Sunny was here last year, and so was Amik. They both knew the rules. This side of the cafeteria is Indian Country, and that one over there is for Eskimos. Two sides, just like a board game, just like that chess game one of the volunteers had taught them how to play last year. The floor even looked like a chessboard with big black and white squares. On this side of the board, Sunny was king. The other side was Amik's. Everyone else knew the rules too, everyone except those two girls, sitting at their own table in their own field of squares, one black-haired and one blonde. Those two were out of the game altogether. Or maybe they'd already been captured, Sunny thought, watching the way the dark one's long hair rippled across the side of her face. Her name was Donna, and she'd been here last year too. She never said a word to anyone about anything, skittish as a wolf. Last year, she always did the same thing, held her cafeteria tray in front of her chest like it might protect her, trying to find the safest spot to sit. Sometimes she found a spot off in the corner, away from everyone, where she would sit real quiet. Sometimes she wouldn't even eat. Sunny paid attention to those kinds of things because he was used to looking after kids. That's how it is when you're the oldest kid in a big family. The freckled white girl with her was new and younger, and unlike Donna, she was so full of words, she didn't seem to have any control over when they came out or what they said. And you could tell that it didn't make a bit of difference to her where she sat. Her name was Chicky, and she and Donna were roommates. Sunny'd heard her talking to Sister Mary Kate. Sunny hadn't seen that other kid until just now. He was small and unnoticeable, wearing huge black-framed Alaska Native Health Service glasses and sitting at the far end of the girls' table, all alone, a little Eskimo with bad eyes. Sunny hadn't noticed him until he shoved those glasses up onto the bridge of his nose, shifting himself into Sunny's field of vision with that one little movement. Suddenly, two more new girls were steering their trays across the room towards Sunny, sliding down onto the bench next to him like they'd known him forever, which they hadn't. Sunny, in fact, had never before seen either one of them. But even though they weren't from his village, they were Athabascan, just like him, and they'd figured out the lay of the land in one shot. He moved over to make room for them. The one girl was named Rose, and the other was Evelyn. Evelyn reminded Sunny of old Anna Sand back home. Tough as a wolverine, with the kind of eyes that never missed a thing. And right now, she had her eyes trained on Amik, who was marching across the cafeteria with his little string of Eskimo pawns. Evelyn didn't like the looks of Amik, you could tell, but she'd already figured out how things worked here at Sacred Heart School, and she knew that Amik was one of the Eskimo, was the one Eskimo you had to deal with if you're going to deal with Eskimos. Somebody ought to teach that kid a thing or two, she muttered, looking straight at Sunny, like she figured Sunny'd be the one to do the teaching. Sunny nodded. The nuns had given them plates full of stringy meat, mushy vegetables, and perfectly rounded scoops of potatoes, with brown gravy poured on top, which made them look like ice cream sundaes, the kind you buy at a Dairy Queen in Fairbanks if you were rich. The meat was okay, but the potatoes had no taste at all. The gravy didn't taste right either, like someone had drained all the fat off. Swede never lets us eat fake potatoes, Chicky announced loud enough for the whole place to hear. She wrinkled her nose for emphasis. Donna didn't say anything, and neither did any of the others. Rose and Evelyn watched Chicky suspiciously from the sides of their eyes, and the Eskimos gave each other looks. Chicky put her chin up high, looked right at Sunny, then grinned at all the Eskimos, even at the little one sitting off by himself. Fearless, Sunny thought. Dumb, but fearless. Where the heck did she come from? Hey, Junior, come sit by us, she called out. and the little kid with the big glasses picked up his tray obediently and moved over, shoving his glasses onto the bridge of his nose again and glancing around like he was embarrassed to be singled out, embarrassed to move and embarrassed not to. All the Eskimo kids nodded at him and smiled like they all shared some private joke. This made Sonny nervous. You don't quiet down, them Eskimos gonna catch you when you go outside to pee and chop your little head right off. Play kickball with it. That's what Sonny's mom used to tell them when they got too wild back home. And when you're a little kid needing to pee and it's dark outside, talk like that can scare the pee right out of you. When you're a big kid at Sacred Heart School and you know your grandfather and his brothers used to kill Eskimo trespassers, well, that kind of talk just makes you tough. And Sonny was plenty tough. Now Amik was marching his Eskimo pawns right past Sonny's table on the Indian side, acting like he owned the place. Evelyn glared. Who say they're going to be here? She muttered. Amik stopped dead in his tracks and turned around real slow. We say, he said, staring right at Evelyn and smiling a great big smart aleck smile like he was laughing at her. Evelyn's eyes got black as water under river ice. You didn't have to know her to see she was not the kind of girl who let people laugh at her. Yeah? What you doing here? She snapped. Amik just stood there grinning down at her. Scouting, he said, like he was some kind of cowboy or something. That word made Sonny's chest tighten. Scouting. If there's going to be any kickball around here, Sonny thought, it's not going to be my head. Amik sauntered over to the heart of the Eskimo table, grinning down at Chicky as he passed and winking at Donna. To Sonny's surprise, Donna blushed. Chicky shoved another forkful of gooey fake potatoes into her mouth. All of a sudden, she was missing Swede really bad. When Swede had told her about going away to boarding school, he never said anything about fake potatoes, that's for sure. The only thing he said was that she was going to a place called Sacred Heart School and she couldn't bring her hula hoop. She looked right square at the hoop and said it too. Or he'd looked right square at the hoop and said it too. Can't take it with you, Chicky. Sorry, girl. But that was okay by Chicky because you can't go anywhere on a hula hoop. And Chicky had known forever that the one thing she wanted to do in life was to see what it's like to live in a place where the roads don't quit rolling at the end of town. That hula hoop had been the only hula hoop north of the Arctic Circle, too. It had come north to Kotzebue on the barge, which is how Swede always ordered stuff for the store, which is why Chicky always got to eat real potatoes instead of fake ones. Real potatoes taste a whole lot better than fake ones, Chicky announced. I don't care for potatoes, Donna said quietly. Chicky put her fork down with a sigh and studied the dry brown meat, slimy vegetables, and wedge of pie. At least the pie looked good. She took a bite of it just to see, watching the nuns, who still stood by their food in the food line. It was apple pie with real apples, and it did taste good. Apple pie is as American as Wheaties and milk. That's what Swede said one time. Not that they ever got Wheaties and milk at home. They'd probably get lots of Wheaties at Sacred Heart, though. Lots of Wheaties with this lumpy powdered milk. Canned milk was better. Why couldn't they have canned milk? Chicky took another bite of pie and looked at Donna sideways. I wonder if that tall nun is the one who does the baking, she said. In fact, she was pretty sure that the tall one, Sister Mary Kate, was the pie baker, but she figured she ought to be polite, her being new and all. Akame said she had a tendency to be bossy, and she wanted to be sure not to be too bossy with her new roommate, her first friend at Sacred Heart School. The nuns were starting to put the food away now, and Donna had turned to watch them. Chicky turned too. An old priest was standing next to the wall by the door, all draped in black. He looked like a black cat. That's what Chicky thought. Like a big black cat waiting to catch something alive in his skinny old claws. Donna looked at him too, but only for a second. Then she looked away quick, like she already knew that priest, already knew all about him. Chicky looked back at the nuns, but she still could feel that priest watching them. It made her skin prickle. She quickly took another bite of pie, studying the way the nuns were putting away the food. The tall one is Sister Mary Kate, Chicky told Donna, helping herself to more pie. I wonder if she's going to teach us how to cook. She's a good cook, don't you think? Maybe it's the other one who makes the pies, Donna said. Chicky almost laughed out loud. She didn't want to be rude or anything, but that skinny old nun disappearing into the kitchen with stringy beans looked way too mean to make a pie this sweet. Chicky looked back at the priest, but he wasn't looking at her and Donna, she realized suddenly. He was watching the boys. Boys take a lot more watching than girls do. That's what Chicky figured. Did your mom teach you how to cook? Chicky asked Donna. She tried to say it real easy, like a normal kid would say it, a kid with a mom. But Donna gave her a funny look anyhow, like she knew. I never learned to cook, Donna said quietly. It's true that a person can tell things about another person without anybody saying it. For instance, you can almost always tell by their hair which girls have mothers and which don't. Chicky's hair was wild as a snowstorm, whereas Donna's was tame as black syrup. Chicky teased a piece of pie crust back and forth across her plate, suddenly self-conscious. I don't have a mother, Donna said. Chicky looked up surprised. Donna took a bite of her own pie and didn't say another word. Two of the Eskimo kids were talking to each other in Eskimo, and Chicky could see right away that the priest did not like this. Not at all. It's true that some people get mad when they can't understand what other people are saying, and Chicky could tell that this priest was one of those kinds of people. She looked back at Donna, but Donna wasn't looking at the priest, and she wasn't looking at Chicky either. She was looking straight out the window, her eyes empty, like she'd gone someplace else, someplace where priests couldn't go. Chicky looked out the window too. The moonlight was shining on the yellow-leaved birch trees outside, making them twinkle and dance in the wind. For a fraction of a second, it got so quiet, Chicky swore she could even hear the sound those leaves were making. Sunny felt a sudden chill in the air and looked around. Most of the other kids were still busy shoveling their mouths full of food, hungry after a long day of missing home. Those two Eskimo brothers were talking together in their own language. Sunny watched them closely, trying to figure out what they were talking about. Horse meat, the bigger one muttered unaccountably. Horse meat, an English word nobody ever used, laced into an Inupiaq sentence. Weird. Before Sunny even had a chance to figure it out, the whole room went dead quiet and everyone looked up, as if by instinct. That old priest was striding toward the Eskimo table, black as a storm cloud, shaking the whole place into an electric silence. He stopped right next to those two brothers and towered over them, tapping his hand with a ruler. Some of the other kids might have wondered why he needed a ruler at dinner time, but Sunny already knew, and so did Amik. The two of them eyed each other without meaning to. Checkmate, Sunny thought, watching Father and ducking his head. Even without looking, he could feel Father standing there like a big black bishop in a game of his own, a bigger, meaner game. And then the only sound in the whole room was the sound that ruler made, smacking that kid's hand hard. Sunny still didn't look. No one looked. They all sat there leaning into each other. One body of kids with a whole lot of dark, averted eyes. That Amik should have warned his kids about Father, Sunny thought, glancing sideways at Amik. He should have told them.